I moved into my apartment in November of 2023. It was a small 2-story building in a quiet part of town. 4 units total, but only 2 were in use. My landlord didn't run a background check or ask for much beyond first month's rent and a security deposit, which I took as a blessing at the time. I was on the ground floor, 1 unit directly above mine, and then 2 vacant units on the other side of the building that had been empty for a while. I work from home doing data entry, so I'm inside most of the day. The apartment wasn't anything special, but it was clean enough, and the neighborhood was the kind of place where nothing seemed to happen. No loud traffic, no foot traffic, no kids playing outside. Just quiet. For the first couple weeks, I didn't notice anything strange. I never saw my upstairs neighbor. I never heard them either, which I appreciated. The building was old, built sometime in the 70s, and you could hear everything through the floors if someone was moving around. But upstairs was silent, like no one lived there at all. I didn't think much about it until early December. I have a routine before bed. I always check the locks, front door, sliding patio door. Sometimes I check them twice. It's not paranoia, it's just habit. One night I went to check the front door and noticed the deadbolt was unlocked. I stood there for a second, staring at it. I was sure I'd locked it earlier. I always lock it. But I was exhausted that week, working late to meet a deadline, so I told myself I must have forgotten. I locked it and went to bed. 2 nights later, it happened again. This time, I knew I'd locked it. I remembered turning the bolt and hearing the click. I remembered it because I'd been thinking about the first time and making a point not to forget. But the deadbolt was unlocked. I checked the door frame for marks. I checked the knob. I tested the lock. Everything worked perfectly. There was no damage, no scratches, nothing that suggested anyone had forced it. After that, I started checking it randomly throughout the evening. Not just at bedtime. I'd lock it, walk away, come back an hour later, and check again. It stayed locked, until it didn't. Around the same time, I started hearing movement upstairs. Not loud movement, not stomping, just faint creaking like someone walking slowly across the floor. It would happen late, usually after midnight. I'd be half asleep and I'd hear a few steps. Then silence. Then a minute later, 1 or 2 more steps. Old buildings make noises. I know that, but these weren't random. They had rhythm. They had pauses that felt like someone standing still, and the footsteps always seemed to stop directly above my bedroom. One night I couldn't sleep, so I got up around 2 in the morning to get water. The second I turned on the kitchen light, I heard the footsteps upstairs shift, moving from one side of the unit to the other, like whoever it was had just started walking again. Then they stopped directly above the kitchen. I stood there holding my glass, barely breathing, listening for anything else. Nothing. No more steps, no pipes, no settling sounds, just silence. I went back to bed and tried to tell myself it was coincidence. The next day, I called my landlord. He was an older guy who kept to himself, but he usually answered when I needed something. I wasn't calling to complain. I just wanted to know who lived up there. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "Quick question. The unit above mine. Do you know if that tenant works nights or something? I hear them moving around pretty late." There was a pause on the line. "Above you?" he said, like he didn't understand the question. "Yeah." "Unit 2? Another pause, longer this time. Then he said, "That unit's empty." I remember gripping my phone a little tighter. "What do you mean, empty?" I asked. "Been empty since September," he said. "Last person moved out before you moved in." "Why?" I told him I'd been hearing footsteps. He gave me the typical explanation: old building, pipes, settling, expansion, contraction. He didn't sound concerned. He offered to come by and check it out if it made me feel better, but it sounded more like something he was saying to end the call. I told him it was fine. After I hung up, I just sat there at my desk, staring at my screen, not working. I kept replaying what he said. That unit's empty. That night, I didn't hear any footsteps. The apartment was quiet, almost painfully quiet, like someone had taken all the normal background noise out of the world. I slept better than I had in days. The next morning, I took out my trash. The dumpster was around the side of the building, near the staircase that led up to Unit 2. As I walked past, I glanced up toward the landing. There was a folding chair placed right beside the upstairs door, not folded and leaning somewhere, not left in the corner. It was open, positioned like someone could sit in it. Facing the stairs, I stopped without meaning to. I'd lived there long enough to know that chair hadn't been there. I took the trash out twice a week. I walked past that staircase constantly. That chair was new. I looked around the parking lot. No one was outside, no cars I didn't recognize. Just quiet morning air, and that chair sitting up there like it belonged. I threw my trash away and went back inside, not taking my eyes off the staircase until I was back through my door. That night, the footsteps returned, slow, deliberate, moving across the floor above me. I got out of bed and stood in the living room, staring at the ceiling. The steps moved from the far end of the unit toward my bedroom, then stopped. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. After about 30 seconds, I heard a faint creak, like someone shifting their weight. Then nothing. I pulled up my landlord's number, thumb hovering over call, but I didn't press it. What was I going to say? That I heard a person in an empty apartment, and there was a chair on the landing like someone had been waiting. I went back to bed and stared at the ceiling until I fell asleep. The next few nights were quiet again. No footsteps, no weird locks. I started to convince myself my brain was filling in gaps. And then the laptop thing happened. My laptop has a small camera at the top of the screen. I cover it with tape. Not because I think I'm important, but because it costs nothing and makes me feel better. One afternoon, I opened my laptop to start work and noticed the tape was gone. I checked the desk, the floor, the keyboard, the edge of the screen. It wasn't stuck anywhere, it was just missing. I tried to think if I'd removed it for a call. I hadn't. I put a new piece of tape over it and moved on. 2 days later, it was gone again. This time, I didn't just replace it, I marked it. I put a tape on, then drew a thin line across it with a pen, half on the tape, half on the plastic around the camera. Something I'd notice if it was removed. The next morning, the tape was still there, but the line didn't match. It looked close, but not perfect, like someone had tried to line it up exactly and missed by a millimeter. It might sound small, but that detail made my stomach turn, because if it wasn't me, it meant someone had been close enough to my laptop to do that. Someone had taken the time to cover it again so I wouldn't notice. Someone careful. That same night, I decided to test something. I lay in bed with my phone screen on, scrolling. The footsteps started upstairs, just a few at first, then moved until they stopped directly above me. I turned my phone screen off and set it face down. The footsteps resumed, moving slowly across the upstairs unit. I waited 10 seconds, then turned my phone screen on again. The footsteps stopped immediately. I did it a second time just to make sure my brain wasn't inventing patterns. Screen off. Steps moved. Screen on. Steps stopped. I placed the phone down and didn't touch it again. I don't remember falling asleep. I just remember lying there with my eyes open, listening for a sound that never came. The next day, I called the landlord again. This time, I told him I wanted to see the upstairs unit. I didn't explain why. I just said I was curious about the layout and was thinking about moving into it in the future. He hesitated, like it was inconvenient, but he agreed to meet me that afternoon. When he arrived, he unlocked Unit 2 and we went inside. It was empty, no furniture, no clothes, no trash, Just dust on the floors and a stale smell like a place that hadn't been lived in for a while. There were cobwebs in the corners. The air felt still. The landlord walked through quickly like he wanted to get it over with. He didn't linger. I checked everything: closets, bathroom, kitchen cabinets, even behind the shower curtain, which made me feel stupid. But I did it anyway. Nothing. As we were leaving, I glanced at the window that faced the parking lot. 2 faint streaks in the dust on the sill, about an inch apart, like something had been resting there. Like someone had leaned something against the glass for a long time. My eyes went immediately to the view. From that window, you could see directly down to my patio, directly to my sliding door. I didn't say anything to the landlord. I didn't want him to think I was crazy. We left, and he locked the door behind us. That night, there were no footsteps, no creaks, no settling sounds. The silence felt heavier than any noise had. I stayed up late, sitting on my couch with the lights off, watching the ceiling, waiting for something to happen. Nothing happened. The next morning, I started packing. I didn't have another place lined up. I didn't care. I just needed out. Around midnight, while I was folding clothes into a box, I heard a sound at my front door. Not a knock, a scrape, soft, like something brushing against wood. I stopped moving. It came again, lower this time, like something dragging very lightly across the bottom of the door. I walked into the living room and stood a few feet away, staring at it. No sound. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. I kept watching. A full minute passed, maybe more. Then I saw a shadow move across the far wall at the end of the hallway, quick, controlled, like someone stepping out of view. I didn't unlock the door. I didn't call out. I grabbed my keys, wallet, and phone and walked to the patio door as quietly as I could. I didn't turn any lights on. I didn't open the blinds. I slipped outside and shut it behind me. I got in my car and drove straight to a friend's place across town. The next morning, I called the police and told them I thought someone had been in my apartment. They sent an officer. He called me later and said the place looked normal. No signs of forced entry, no missing property, no damage. He asked if I'd been stressed. I told him I'd been working a lot. He said overtired people hear things sometimes, that old buildings are noisy, that fear can make patterns out of nothing. He told me to get some rest and call again if it happened again. I never went back. My landlord let me out of the lease early after I told him I had to relocate for work. He didn't argue. He didn't ask questions. I left most of my stuff behind. I replaced what I could. It was worth it. 2 weeks later, while I was going through accounts on my phone, I noticed something small. A device sign-in notification. Not an email. Not a message. Just a brief security alert I'd missed at the time. It said a login was attempted on one of my accounts from a device I didn't recognize. No location, no helpful details. Just a time. 2:47 a.m. It could have been nothing. It could have been a random bot. It could have been a failed attempt that had nothing to do with me. But I stared at that time for a long time, because it was the same time I used to wake up in that apartment without knowing why. And even now, if I wake up and my phone says 2:47, I don't go back to sleep.